It started as an ordinary family brunch, but as I took a sip of the coffee my husband made, something felt wrong. The metallic taste lingered too long. It wasn't just bad coffee. It was poison. My husband and sister-in-law had been conspiring to destroy me, poisoning me slowly for months. Why? Because my success threatened their control. The worst part? I never saw it coming. I never thought I'd be sitting here, writing down what seems like the start of some twisted thriller. Yet here I am, trying to make sense of everything that's been happening. My name is Claire Mitchell, and at 29 I've built a life that many people would envy. I've worked my way up in the marketing world, carving out a place for myself in a competitive industry. But even more importantly, I've been married for 3 wonderful years to Ethan Mitchell, a man I thought I knew inside and out. Nashville is home to us. Our cozy apartment overlooking the city's bustling streets, the life we've built together. From the outside, everything seems perfect. But nothing in life is ever quite as it seems, is it? One thing about Ethan is that he's deeply attached to his family. That's why every month, without fail, we make our way to his sister Victoria's house for a family brunch. It's a tradition, something he values and insists we do without question. And for the most part, I didn't mind it. The house was always warm, filled with laughter and chatter, and the food was always delicious thanks to Victoria's impeccable cooking skills. But something's been off about those brunches for a while now, and I can't quite put my finger on it. I've tried to ignore it, brushing off the weird little things that nagged at me every time we walked through Victoria's door. It's as if an invisible cloud hangs over the house, just out of sight but always there. I tell myself I'm just imagining things, but deep down I know something isn't right. Ethan, of course, is oblivious to my unease. He's always the charming host, eager to please everyone, making sure everyone is well-fed and happy. But I've noticed the subtle changes, the way he's grown distant at times, as if he's hiding something. Maybe it's nothing, or maybe it's just the stress of his job, but I can't shake the feeling that there's more to this story. Today was just like any other family brunch at Victoria's house, except something felt different. Maybe it was the fact that we'd barely spoken on the drive over, the silence hanging between us like an unspoken question. Or maybe it was because the moment I stepped into that house, a familiar sense of discomfort crept up my spine. But then Ethan smiled at me, and all my worries melted away. He walked over to the kitchen counter, where a pot of coffee was brewing, and turned to me with that familiar grin. "I made this just for you, Claire. Thought you might want something a little different this time," he said, his voice warm and inviting. I smiled back, trying to match his enthusiasm, but there was a hint of unease in my stomach. I told myself I was being ridiculous. He's just trying to be thoughtful, I reasoned. It's just coffee. But when Ethan placed the cup in front of me, I couldn't ignore it. The smell. It wasn't like any coffee I'd ever had before. There was something metallic in the air, something that immediately made my stomach turn. A strange, almost sickeningly sweet scent filled my nose, and for a split second, I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. "Everything okay?" Ethan asked, noticing my hesitation as I stared at the cup. Yeah, I forced a smile. "Just not quite used to the smell, that's all." I reached for the mug, trying to ignore the gnawing feeling in the pit of my stomach. I didn't want to make a scene in front of his family, not over something so trivial. So I brought the cup to my lips and took a sip. The coffee was hot, but the taste, it was off. It wasn't bitter like coffee should be, nor was it smooth. There was something else in it, something that I couldn't quite place. It lingered on my tongue, making me feel unsettled. "How's the coffee?" Ethan asked again, this time with a sly smile. "It's good," I replied, trying my best to sound convincing. "Really good." But inside, I felt a wave of unease wash over me. This wasn't just coffee. I set the mug down on the table and tried to focus on the conversation around me. Ethan was chatting away with Victoria, and their voices filled the room, but my mind kept drifting back to that cup of coffee. There was something so wrong about it, and I couldn't figure out why. As the conversation continued, I tried to distract myself, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I'd been feeling this way for months now, ever since the last time we'd had one of these family brunches. It started small at first, nothing more than a vague sense of unease, but lately it had grown into something bigger. And now with this strange coffee, I couldn't help but wonder if my instincts were finally starting to catch up with something darker. The last time I had been at Victoria's house, I ended up in the emergency room. I had eaten something during dinner, something Victoria had prepared, and within hours I was doubled over in pain. The doctors couldn't explain it. They said it could have been a virus or maybe food poisoning. But I had my doubts. The way I felt, it wasn't like any food poisoning I'd experienced before. The pain was sharp, sudden, and debilitating. I remember Victoria being so sweet, so apologetic, assuring me that it must have been something I ate earlier in the day. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't just a coincidence. It had happened too many times before, always after meals at her house, always with her food. And now this coffee. I looked across the table at Victoria, watching her intently. She was sipping her own coffee, completely unaffected, her eyes scanning her phone, as if everything was perfectly normal. I couldn't help but feel a wave of suspicion flood my thoughts. Could she be involved in this? Was she somehow behind everything? But what would her motive be? Was it just some twisted game, or was there something deeper at play here? I couldn't stop thinking about the past few months, the strange reactions I'd had after eating with them, the way I always seemed to feel sick with no real explanation. Something was off and I wasn't just being paranoid. I knew it, but how could I prove it? And more importantly, how could I confront Ethan without sounding crazy? He was my husband. I trusted him. But lately, his behavior had been different. As I sat there pretending to enjoy the conversation, my mind raced. I had to figure this out. And fast. I glanced at my phone, feeling a sudden need to check for any missed messages or calls. I had to distract myself, keep my thoughts in check, or I might lose my nerve altogether. But as I stood up to step away from the table, I felt my heart race. I couldn't help but wonder, was I overreacting? Or was something far darker at play here, something I wasn't ready to face? As the conversation continued around me, I found myself unable to concentrate. The strange metallic taste of the coffee lingered in my mouth, gnawing at me. I couldn't let this slide, not again. Every time something odd had happened in the past few months, I'd brushed it off, told myself I was imagining things. But now, with that coffee, that foul, almost chemical smell still hanging in the air, something told me it was time to stop pretending. I couldn't just sit here and wait for the inevitable. Not again. Not after the hospital visits, the unexplained illnesses, the sickening feeling in my gut that something was terribly wrong. I needed answers. But how could I get them without arousing suspicion? How could I find out if my husband, my family, were really involved in something so sinister? I glanced at Ethan across the table. His smile was still there, as charming and warm as always. But the suspicion in my gut tightened. How could he be so unaffected? Did he know what was going on? Did he want me to drink that coffee? Or was I just being paranoid? Victoria sat across from me, sipping her coffee, looking as calm and collected as ever. Her demeanor was far too serene for my liking. Could she be in on it? Did she know more than I thought? I had to know for sure. I had to make sure I wasn't jumping to conclusions. Suddenly, an idea struck me. One that made my heart race with both fear and excitement. I would switch the cups. It was bold, risky, but it was the only way I could find out what was really going on. I'd been studying Victoria's cup for a while now. The coffee seemed completely fine to her. No signs of hesitation, no strange reaction. If it was the coffee that was the issue, then surely she would be affected too, right? I didn't have much time. I needed to act quickly. Before anyone noticed I was slipping away from the table, I excused myself with a forced smile, pretending I had to go to the bathroom. But instead of walking down the hallway to the bathroom, I made my way into the study. The room was quiet, dimly lit, filled with bookshelves lined with old novels and framed pictures of Ethan and Victoria's childhood. The door was slightly ajar, just enough for me to peek out without being seen. My heart pounded in my chest as I waited. Time seemed to slow down, but I knew I had to stay calm. I wasn't sure what I was going to find, but I had to be prepared for anything. I took a deep breath and waited for the right moment. From the study, I could still see the dining room, and sure enough, Victoria was distracted, scrolling through her phone, not paying attention to the cup in front of her. Ethan had his back turned as he chatted with some of the other family members. This was it, the moment I had been waiting for. With a quick glance to make sure no one was watching, I took the opportunity to switch our cups. I didn't spill anything, But my hands were shaking as I carefully placed Victoria's cup in front of me and mine in front of her. The moment I returned to the table, I could feel my pulse quicken. I had done it. Now all I had to do was wait and watch. It felt like hours as I tried to maintain my composure, forcing myself to engage in the conversation. I could hardly focus on anything, my mind racing with anticipation. But then a few minutes later I saw it. Victoria's hand trembled as she lifted the cup to her lips. At first I thought it was just a nervous gesture. But then her face changed. Her smile faded and her complexion paled. She set the cup down and blinked rapidly, her hands shaking as if she couldn't quite hold them steady. My breath caught in my throat as I watched her. Was it happening? Was this the same reaction I had when I drank that coffee earlier? Suddenly Victoria's face contorted in pain, and she gasped, her body trembling. She tried to stand, but her legs gave out from underneath her. She collapsed into her chair, her face ashen, as if every ounce of strength had drained from her body. Victoria! Ethan called out, his voice laced with confusion and concern. What's wrong? I stayed frozen, watching from the study, my heart in my throat. I wanted to rush over to her to check if she was okay. But something told me to wait. I had to see how this played out. I had to make sure. Within seconds the room was in chaos. Ethan rushed to Victoria's side, his face now filled with panic. He called out for help, his voice frantic. But something in his eyes, something in his frantic movements struck me. There was fear, yes. But there was also something else. Something I couldn't quite place. And then it hit me, the realization, cold and sharp like a knife to the chest. Ethan wasn't just worried. He was acting. This wasn't just a freak accident. It was part of a plan. I had been right all along. As I stood there in the study, my body trembling with a mix of fear and anger, the pieces started to fall into place. I had suspected something was wrong for months, but now seeing Victoria on the floor writhing in pain, I knew. This was no accident. This was planned. And Ethan was involved. I quickly grabbed my phone from my bag and started recording. I knew I had to document everything. This couldn't be happening. Not in my own home, not in my own family. But I couldn't ignore it anymore. I needed proof. I needed to know exactly what was going on. Ethan was beside Victoria now, his face pale and frantic. "Victoria, stay with me," he shouted, his voice tight with panic. "What happened? What did you drink?" Victoria's eyes were glazed over, her breathing shallow, but she managed to get a few words out. It wasn't supposed to happen like this." Ethan looked up at me then, his eyes wide with shock. He must have noticed the change in my expression, the way I was standing there watching intently. "Claire." He started, but his voice faltered. Victoria let out a weak laugh, though it was more of a pained cough than anything else. "You didn't think she'd notice, did you?" She spat, her voice shaky. "You thought she'd just drink it and not suspect a thing?" I froze, my heart racing. She knew. She knew everything. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Victoria struggled to sit up, her hand clutching her stomach as if she couldn't quite breathe. "Ethan told me. He said it would be easy. Get you sick enough so you'd miss the Henderson presentation next week." She looked at me with a mix of guilt and anger in her eyes. "It was supposed to make you sick. Make you miss it." I took a step back, my head spinning. What was she saying? "Ethan." I whispered, the name tasting like bile in my mouth. "You did this." Ethan's face drained of color, and he looked away, as if he couldn't meet my gaze. He shook his head, trying to gather his thoughts. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," he muttered, almost to himself. "I just needed you to slow down, Claire. You've been working too hard. You were too focused on the client meetings. I thought if I could just get you to miss 1 inch. And you thought poisoning me was the answer?" I interrupted, my voice rising. "That's how you were going to help me?" Victoria's words echoed in my mind. "We've been doing this for months, Claire. Ever since you started outshining me. Outshining both of us." I could barely breathe. Every word they had said twisted in my gut like a cruel joke. And the last shred of trust one had in Ethan evaporated in an instant. The man I had married, the man I had trusted, he wasn't who I thought he was. And Victoria, my sister-in-law, was no better. Ethan and Victoria had been scheming together, using me as their pawn, All for the sake of power, all for the sake of the business. I did it for us, Claire, Ethan said quietly, finally meeting my gaze. I just wanted things to be easier. I thought if I could get you out of the way for one meeting. You tried to kill me. I whispered, my voice trembling. Victoria, still pale and shaking, met my eyes. It wasn't supposed to go this far. It was just supposed to keep you down long enough. But the damage was already done. The truth was out. And I had all the proof I needed. The silence that followed was deafening. The truth was still sinking in, but with every word Victoria spoke, a heavy sense of realization washed over me. Ethan, my husband, my partner, was not the man I had believed him to be. But it wasn't just him, it was Victoria too. Together they had orchestrated months of manipulation, each attempt carefully calculated, each meal designed to break me down bit by bit. I couldn't shake the image of Victoria on the floor, struggling for breath, her face pale, her body trembling as the coffee took effect. Her confession about the plan, the fact that it was all part of a strategy to get me out of the way for the big presentation, made my head spin. I had always trusted her. She had been like a second sister to me, or so I had thought. As I stood there trying to process what I had just learned, I felt an overwhelming need to step away from the chaos. I needed to clear my head, to take a step back and let everything settle. My mind was racing, but I had no idea how to proceed. Should I confront Ethan right now? Should I call the police and expose them both? I needed to think, and the only way I could do that was to remove myself from the scene for a while. I wandered into the living room, aimlessly walking around the familiar space that once felt so comforting. But now everything felt tainted. The pictures on the walls, the cozy furniture, the little trinkets on the shelves, none of it mattered anymore. It was as though the very air had shifted, and I was suffocating under the weight of my own disbelief. That's when I saw it, a photo, one I hadn't noticed before. It was sitting on the coffee table, half hidden behind a stack of old magazines. I picked it up, turning it over in my hands. The photo was from a family gathering probably a year ago. I remembered the event well, an anniversary celebration for Ethan's parents. Everyone was smiling in the photo, posing in front of a beautiful floral arrangement. Ethan was standing next to me, looking as happy as I had ever seen him. But it wasn't him that caught my attention. It was Victoria. She was standing beside me, her arm around my shoulder, as was the custom in family photos. But her eyes, they weren't the loving, sisterly eyes I had always seen. There was something in her gaze, something calculating. She wasn't looking at the camera like everyone else. Instead, her eyes were focused on me, but they weren't filled with affection. No, there was something far darker in them. Something I hadn't noticed at the time, but I saw it now, clear as day. A coldness, a look that suggested she was already planning something. I ran my fingers over the edges of the photo, and memories of that day began flooding back. I remembered how I had felt after the party, the sudden dizziness and nausea that overtook me just as we were about to leave. I had chalked it up to being tired, or maybe the wine we'd had with dinner. But now, in light of everything I'd learned, I couldn't help but wonder if that was when it all started. I remembered reaching for a glass of water at the table that night, just water, or so I thought. But it wasn't water. It was something else, something that made me feel weak, disoriented. The symptoms had been subtle at first, just a slight headache, a wave of dizziness, a mild stomach ache. But now I realized it wasn't the wine, it wasn't exhaustion. It was something far more sinister. It all came together in that moment: the photo, the strange look in Victoria's eyes, the glass of water I had unknowingly drunk. I had thought those incidents were just coincidences, just bad luck. But they weren't. They were planned. Every single one of them. Victoria and Ethan had been working together for months, and I was none the wiser. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized how long this had been going on. I wasn't paranoid, I wasn't imagining things. They had been poisoning me, slowly and deliberately, with the intention of taking me out of the equation altogether. And all for what? Power? Control? A business deal? The thought of it made my stomach churn. I stood there in the middle of the living room, the weight of the truth pressing down on me, making it hard to breathe. How had I not seen it? How had I been so blind? I threw the photo back on the table, my hands shaking. I needed to find more. I needed to understand everything, to know how deep this went. I couldn't just sit here and let them get away with it. I had to take action. But where to start? That's when I remembered the phone. Ethan's phone. I didn't hesitate for long. I knew I needed answers and I needed them fast. Ethan was still in the dining room with Victoria, probably still trying to stabilize her. I had no idea what he was saying to her, but it didn't matter. I knew that for now I could take this opportunity to gather more evidence. I slipped out of the living room, heading toward our bedroom. Ethan's phone was lying on the nightstand, just where he had left it when we rushed out for brunch. My heart pounded in my chest as I picked it up, knowing that what I was doing was risky snooping, betraying his trust. But this wasn't about trust anymore. This was about survival. This was about figuring out how deep the lies went, and how I was going to stop them. I unlocked the phone, my fingers trembling as I scrolled through the messages. There were texts from work, texts from friends, nothing out of the ordinary until I saw it. A message from an unknown number. The text was short, to the point, and it sent a wave of cold dread through me. Don't worry, the plan is still on track. We'll finish everything next week. I stared at the screen for a long time, trying to make sense of it. The words echoed in my mind, and the weight of them settled in my chest. Finish everything, what did that mean? And who was this person? I scrolled up, hoping to find more context. There were several other messages between them, but they were all cryptic and vague. Whoever this person was, they were in on it too. They were working with Ethan. I had no idea who they were, but the thought of someone else being involved made my skin crawl. The message itself was chilling, not just because of what it implied, but because of the timing. They were still carrying out their plan. The coffee today, the poisoning, the attempts to sabotage my career, it was all part of a much bigger scheme, and it was far from over. They had a timeline, and whatever finishing everything meant, it wasn't going to be good for me. I read the message over and over again, trying to decipher any hint that could help me understand what was really going on. But there was nothing. Just a few more messages about the plan. Nothing more. I felt a rising sense of panic. They were still working together. Ethan, Victoria, and this mysterious person were all in on it, and they weren't going to stop until their plan was complete. I needed to know who this was. I needed to confront Ethan, get answers, expose them both for what they were. But first I had to figure out who this other person was. And to do that, I needed to dig deeper. There had to be more. I couldn't let this go. With shaking hands, I took a screenshot of the message and forwarded it to my own phone. It wasn't enough, but it was a start. I put the phone back on the nightstand and stood there for a moment, my mind racing. I couldn't just sit around and wait anymore. It was time to act. I had the proof. Now I needed to find out just how far this conspiracy went. The weight of the evidence in my hands was almost too much to bear. My heart was pounding, the adrenaline surging through me as I realized just how deep this treachery went. Ethan, my husband, the man I had trusted with my life, was the mastermind behind all of this. But there was still so much I didn't know. I needed answers. I needed to face him, confront him, and make him admit what he had done. As I walked back into the dining room, where Ethan was still beside Victoria, who was now lying on the floor with a pale, sweat-drenched face, I felt my breath catch in my throat. His frantic gestures were no longer comforting. They were signs of guilt. His attempts to hold her steady, to act as if this was just an unfortunate accident, only confirmed what I had been suspecting all along. I couldn't wait any longer. I took a deep breath, steadied myself, and stepped forward. The moment I did, Ethan's eyes snapped toward me, filled with a sudden sense of realization, fear, and maybe even a hint of something darker, guilt. "Claire," he began, his voice shaking, "you shouldn't be here. We need to get her to the hospital." His voice trembled, but his words were hollow. "No, Ethan," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "I need you to explain yourself. Right now." Victoria's eyes fluttered, and she made a weak attempt to sit up. She was in no condition to talk, but that didn't matter to me anymore. I had to confront Ethan now, before he had any more time to lie, to cover up the truth. I could see it in his eyes, the panic, the uncertainty. But there was something more, something he wasn't saying. "You've lied to me, Ethan. For months. For years." I continued, my voice growing steadier with every word. "The coffee today, the sickness, the hospital visits, every time I got ill, you had an excuse ready. But now I have proof. Proof of what you've been doing." His face went pale as I pulled out my phone and displayed the messages from his phone, the ones I had found earlier. "I know about your plans, Ethan. About you and Victoria working together to sabotage me, to poison me slowly. I know about the messages you've been sending to someone else. I know everything. His mouth opened and closed as if he was trying to find the right words. Claire. I never wanted this. It's not what you think, he stammered, his hands shaking as he wiped his brow. I just wanted you to slow down. You were working too hard. I thought if I could just make you take a break, everything would go back to normal. Make me take a break? I repeated, my voice rising. By poisoning me? By getting me sick so I couldn't attend meetings, so I'd miss the opportunity of a lifetime. My chest tightened and for a moment, I thought I might collapse from the weight of his betrayal. You tried to destroy me, Ethan. He flinched at the words, but he didn't deny it. The silence that hung in the air was thick and suffocating. Ethan, you were the one who poisoned me, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. You were the one who made sure I was too sick to go to work, too sick to attend those meetings. And Victoria was just your pawn in this sick, twisted game. Ethan's eyes shifted nervously. I could see the conflict in them, but I knew the truth now. He wasn't just guilty of a few bad decisions. He was guilty of trying to destroy me. I'm sorry, Claire, he said, but the apology sounded hollow, empty. I didn't mean to hurt you. I thought it was the only way to fix things. I thought you were getting too powerful, too good at your job. You were going to leave me behind. The words hit me like a slap. The realization of what Ethan had just said made my blood run cold. He hadn't been trying to help me. He had been trying to tear me down, to make sure I would never surpass him, never outshine him. His jealousy and insecurity had driven him to this point. And Victoria? I asked, turning to her, though she was still struggling to stay conscious. What's her role in all of this? Was she in on it? Ethan hesitated for a long moment. His face crumpled with guilt as he finally spoke. Victoria. She didn't know about the poisoning. She just helped me set things up. She thought it was just a harmless way to make you take it easy. I told her it would be fine. She didn't realize how far it was going to go. She thought it was just a way to get you to stay home, to get you to stop working so much. But, he paused, looking at Victoria with a mixture of guilt and something darker. But it got out of control. I never meant for it to go this far. I just wanted to get you out of the way long enough. I stared at him, my heart pounding in my chest. Everything was becoming clearer by the second, but it didn't make it any easier to bear. I never wanted to hurt you, Claire, Ethan said again, his voice breaking. But his words sounded as fake as the apology. He didn't care about me. He cared about control. He cared about his own insecurities. And now he was caught in the web of his own lies. As Ethan continued to stammer, trying to explain away his actions, my mind raced. I was still processing everything he had said, still reeling from the fact that my husband, someone I trusted above all else, had been conspiring against me all this time. But something wasn't adding up. There was a final piece to this puzzle that I couldn't quite place. I needed to know everything. I needed to understand why Ethan had gone so far. He had admitted to poisoning me, but the question lingered, why? Why go through all this trouble, risking everything just to take me down? Just as I was about to demand more answers from him, I heard the sound of sirens in the distance. The police were coming. I had already called them before. And now it was time to face the consequences of Ethan and Victoria's actions. Victoria, barely able to sit up, shot me a look. It was one I would never forget, part fear, part resentment. She knew it was over. The truth was coming out, and there was no way out for either of them. Just then, something unexpected happened. Ethan, realizing that there was no way out, said something that made my blood run cold. You don't understand, Claire, he whispered. His voice low and filled with a strange kind of dread. It wasn't just about the job. It wasn't about the business. It was about you. I looked at him, confused. What are you talking about? Ethan swallowed hard, his eyes avoiding mine. It was never just about work, Claire. It was you. I had to get rid of you. You were too good. Too talented. You would have outshone me, taken everything away from me. You were going to take my place. His words hit me like a slap. I stood there, frozen, unable to process what he had just confessed. I didn't just want to get you out of the way for a few meetings. I had to make sure you were gone for good. I had to make sure you didn't succeed because if you did, I'd be left with nothing. The weight of his confession crashed over me. The plan was never just about poisoning me, it was about eliminating me entirely. And Victoria, she wasn't the mastermind. She had been a pawn in his game just as I had been. As the police arrived and began taking statements, I could barely hold it together. Ethan's confession had shattered everything I thought I knew about him. He wasn't just trying to hurt me professionally. He had been plotting to destroy me on every level. And in that moment I realized that the truth wasn't always what it seemed. The people you trusted the most could become the ones who betrayed you the hardest. Ethan and Victoria were arrested shortly after, their lies finally unraveling in the face of the evidence. But even as they were led away in handcuffs, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of calm wash over me. I had survived their scheme. I had come out on top. The truth had been revealed, and it was finally time for me to take back control of my life. The day after Ethan and Victoria were taken away by the police, I couldn't seem to shake the whirlwind of emotions that clouded my mind. It had all happened so quickly. One moment I was living a life I thought I knew, and the next I was standing on the other side of a shocking revelation. Ethan's betrayal still stung deeply, and I found myself struggling to comprehend the full extent of the damage he had caused. Yet, as the days passed and I pieced together the story, one truth became increasingly clear. This wasn't just about Ethan's insecurities or Victoria's jealousy. I wasn't just a victim. I had unknowingly played a part in this twisted drama. I had been sitting in my living room, still processing everything that had happened, when I received a call from Dr. Phillips, the doctor who had treated me during my last hospital visit. The police had been in touch with her, and she requested to meet with me. At first, I wasn't sure what more there was to talk about. I had already given my statement to the authorities, and my mind was consumed with thoughts of what I'd just learned. But there was a nagging feeling in my gut, one that told me I needed to hear what Dr. Phillips had to say. I drove to the clinic, my thoughts racing with every mile. The further I drove, the more I realized that this story wasn't over yet. There was still something missing, a piece of the puzzle that hadn't yet been revealed. And when I walked into Dr. Phillips' office, that piece fell into place. "Claire, I've reviewed your test results again, and there's something we need to discuss," Dr. Phillips said as soon as I sat down, her face serious. At first, I didn't think much of it, but now that we have all the information from the police, I think you need to know something important. I listened intently as she continued, my stomach sinking. "The substances we found in your system, they weren't just from the most recent poisoning attempt. When we ran the tests, we saw that you had trace amounts of toxins in your blood for months. The levels were low, but enough to make you feel sick, dizzy, and fatigued. It's what we call a low-dose accumulation." I stared at her, feeling my heart beat faster in my chest. "What are you saying? Are you saying I've been poisoned this whole time?" Dr. Phillips nodded slowly, her gaze never leaving mine. "Yes, Claire. These toxins have been building up in your body, and from what I can see, they were introduced in small, almost undetectable amounts. It's clear now that what happened to you wasn't an isolated incident. Ethan and Victoria didn't just poison you once. They've been doing it gradually, feeding you small doses to weaken you over time." I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. All those times I had felt lightheaded, nauseous, and weak after dinners at Ethan and Victoria's house, they weren't just coincidental. I had dismissed them as exhaustion or stress, blaming myself for not taking better care of my health. But now the truth was undeniable. They had been poisoning me, and I had known it. Or at least I had felt it. "I didn't know," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I thought it was just stress or bad luck. But I must have known something was wrong. I felt it every time I got sick after being with them." Dr. Phillips sat back in her chair, her expression softening. "It's not your fault, Claire. These types of toxins are designed to be subtle, to go unnoticed until the damage is done. But there's something else we need to talk about. Something that's even more important." I looked at her, my heart pounding in my chest. "What do you mean? What else is there?" Dr. Phillips leaned forward slightly. "What we found in your system is consistent with a long-term plan, one that was meant to break down your body slowly. They didn't just want you to miss a few meetings, Claire. They wanted you weakened, vulnerable. They knew that if they could keep you sick enough for long enough, they could control you. And here's the thing that's most troubling. I think on some level you knew what was happening. I blinked, confusion sweeping over me. What do you mean? You've been taking small steps to gather information, Dr. Phillips said gently. You've felt the toxins working, and without realizing it, you've been monitoring your health, tracking your symptoms. You were starting to suspect something was wrong before you even realized what they were doing. And I think somewhere deep down you knew. I stared at her, stunned. I had been tracking my symptoms, yes, but only to make sure I wasn't losing my mind. I never truly considered the possibility that I was being poisoned on purpose. But now that she said it, it made sense. I had always pushed through, convinced it was just fatigue, a stress-induced illness. And yet, deep down, I had suspected something darker was at play. You weren't just a passive victim, Dr. Phillips continued. You were actively trying to understand what was happening to you, trying to piece together the puzzle. You knew, Claire, before it even became clear. Her words hit me like a wave. I hadn't been totally helpless. I had been aware on some level that something was wrong, but I had allowed myself to remain in the dark. I had chosen to endure the symptoms, hoping they would go away. I had let my guard down because I thought I could handle it. I had been part of the story without realizing it. The realization stunned me. I wasn't just a victim, I had been complicit in my own suffering. Allowing myself to stay in a situation I had known in some way was dangerous. I hadn't taken action sooner, hadn't trusted my instincts enough to confront the truth. The days that followed were a blur. The truth had been revealed, and the weight of it still pressed on me, but it was time for me to take action. Ethan and Victoria had been arrested and were facing charges of attempted murder, among other crimes. Their betrayal had been uncovered, but I knew there was more to the story. The evidence against them was overwhelming. The recordings, the text messages, the poison traces in my blood, it was all there. But for me, the most important part was finally confronting the truth and understanding the role I had played in my own journey. The trial moved quickly. It wasn't long before the full scope of the conspiracy came to light. Ethan's desire for control, his insecurities, and the lengths he was willing to go to keep his power were laid bare for everyone to see. Victoria, too, was charged with conspiring against me, though it was clear she had been more of a pawn than a mastermind. She had been manipulated by Ethan, who had played on her fears and jealousy. During the trial, I had to testify about the months of suffering, about the times I had been poisoned without realizing it. I talked about the dinners, the subtle signs, the sickness that had gradually become a part of my life. And I realized something else in that moment. I wasn't just testifying about what had happened to me. I was reclaiming my own story. I was telling the world that I had survived this, that I had been stronger than I knew. In the end, the jury found both Ethan and Victoria guilty. The judge sentenced them to long prison terms, and though the verdict was bittersweet, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. Justice had been served, and I could finally begin to heal. But even as the trial came to a close, I knew that the real work was just beginning. I had to rebuild my life, to find my way back to the person I used to be before all this happened. But this time I would do it on my terms. No more lies. No more manipulation. No more allowing myself to be the victim. I was free now. The hardest part was over. And with that, I was ready to move on, stronger than I had ever been before. The weeks following the trial were a whirlwind. After everything I had been through, after facing betrayal and deception from the people I thought I knew and loved, I found myself standing at the edge of a new beginning. Ethan and Victoria's arrest had shattered my world, but it had also given me a clarity I hadn't realized I needed. I was free from the lies, free from the poison they had been feeding me, both literally and figuratively. But more than that, I was free from the fear that had held me back for so long. I didn't know where to go next. I wasn't sure what my life would look like after everything that had happened. But one thing was clear. I wouldn't let this define me. I wouldn't let the mistakes of my past, or the mistakes others had made, hold me back. I threw myself into my work, knowing that it would be the one thing that would allow me to regain control of my life. I knew that no matter what happened, I could rebuild my career, rebuild my confidence, and rebuild the trust one had in myself. It wasn't going to be easy, but I was ready for the challenge. And it was during this time, as I began to pick up the pieces of my life, that I was invited to speak at a business conference in Nashville, a chance to share my story with others. The invitation had come as a surprise. First, I was hesitant. I wasn't sure if I was ready to open up about everything that had happened, about the trauma, the pain, and the betrayal I had experienced. But after a lot of thought, I realized that sharing my story could help others who might be facing similar struggles. It could show them that, no matter how hard things get, perseverance and integrity will always lead the way. When I stood in front of that audience with my heart pounding in my chest, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. I had done it. I was here speaking my truth, standing tall in the face of everything that had tried to tear me down. I've spent the last few months learning what it means to truly persevere. I began, my voice steady and clear. I've learned that success isn't just about talent. It's not just about the work you put in. It's about your integrity. It's about your ability to stay true to yourself, even when the world around you tries to break you. The crowd was silent, listening intently, and I could see the recognition in their eyes. Many of them had faced their own challenges, whether in business or in life, and here I was, showing them that no matter what, they could come out the other side stronger than before. I never imagined I would be standing here talking about overcoming something like betrayal, something so close to home. I continued, pausing to let the words sink in. But I've learned that what matters most isn't what others do to you. What matters is how you respond. I could have let my circumstances define me. I could have let the fear, the doubt, the betrayal destroy everything I had worked for. But I chose not to. I chose to take control of my life again. I looked out over the crowd, seeing the faces of the people who had come to hear my story. Some were nodding, some were wiping tears from their eyes, and I knew then that what I was saying was resonating with them. I was no longer just sharing my pain, I was sharing my strength. The path to success is not always easy, I said, my voice stronger now. There will be challenges. There will be setbacks. There will be moments when you feel like giving up. But if you keep going, if you hold on to your integrity and your courage, there's nothing you can't overcome. Trust yourself. Never let anyone take that away from you. The applause that followed was deafening, and as I stood there, I felt something shift within me. For the first time in months, I felt truly free. The past was behind me, but I was still standing. I was still here. And no matter what came next, I was ready for it. In the months that followed my speech, things began to change in ways I hadn't anticipated. After I shared my story at the conference, word spread about my perseverance and my commitment to integrity. More clients reached out to me, wanting to work with me, wanting to partner with someone who had proven they could overcome adversity. It felt surreal at times, but it also felt right. I was rebuilding piece by piece, and I was doing it my way. One day, not long after the conference, I received a call from a major client, one that Victoria and Ethan had tried to sabotage me from acquiring. This was the same client they had worked tirelessly to prevent me from landing, the one they had believed would push me out of the business world altogether. But now they were offering me a long-term contract. The offer was too good to pass up. When I hung up the phone, I sat there for a long moment, just staring at the screen. I could hardly believe it. After everything that had happened, after everything they had done to me, this was my chance to show the world that I wasn't defined by my past. I wasn't defined by their lies or their manipulation. I had built something real, something that was entirely my own. I thought about Victoria and Ethan in that moment. How they had schemed and plotted, how they had tried to tear me down. All because they couldn't stand to see me succeed. And yet, here I was standing stronger than ever before. They had underestimated me. They had underestimated my resolve, my will to fight for what I believed in. And now it was my turn to move forward and leave them behind. The offer from the client wasn't just a career victory, it was a personal one as well. It was proof that I had survived their attempts to ruin me. It was proof that no matter what life threw at me, I could rise above it. As I signed the contract, I couldn't help but feel a sense of peace wash over me. The past was behind me, and it was time to move forward. The betrayal, the pain, it had all led me to this moment. And now it was my turn to take control. Looking out the window of my office, I realized that I had finally let go of the past. Ethan and Victoria were gone from my life. The toxic people who had tried to destroy me were no longer a part of my story. And as I looked ahead, I saw a future full of possibilities, full of potential. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. And with that, I said goodbye to the past. I was ready to embrace the future.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for updates on new videos. See you next time.